Hi guys, this is History with Heath, and today we'll be looking at the Assyrian Church of the East, also known as the Nestorian Church, which is kind of inaccurate, but kind of not. The Assyrian Church of the East spread into Asia and is known as the main church that was able to get into Asia, and it never became a large community compared to religions like Buddhism, Islam, Taoism, but definitely was able to have lots of long-standing communities, especially in places like Western and Central China and Central Asia. And of course, you'll be thinking, okay, Assyrian Church of the East, you might, that's of course the Assyrians in Syria. And no, I'm not confusing them with the Syrians, but they do live around Syria in that kind of region of the Middle East. Anyway, let's start. So the Assyrian Church of the East is one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world, and it developed in Mesopotamia, so that area, and they have lots of links to Thomas, and by the 3rd and 4th centuries, there were many Christian communities in the Sasanian Empire that were developing very independently from the Catholic Church at the time. Christianity was viewed with suspicion, of course, because this was a mainly Zoroastrian empire at the time. This was before Islam. But a unique thing I want to start with is that their main liturgical language is Syriac, which is a dialect of Aramaic, rather than Greek or Latin in the Catholic and Orthodox churches, which is very emblematic, I'd say, especially their liturgy and their intellectual style. Anyway, by the early 5th century, the Church of the East, that's another name for them, even had its own patriarch, Catholicos, in the Seleucia, Ctesiphon, and a big growing network of monasteries and schools. So sorry, I had a glitch in my sources just then. Anyway, the Sasanian Empire was Rome's rival. And since Christianity was a religion of the Rome, Persian Christians were viewed with lots of suspicion, basically. Anyway, I'm going to talk about the formation of the Nestorian theology, because one thing to note is that, like I said earlier, is that they are separate things. The Assyrian Church of the East is not necessarily Nestorian, but they have the similar beliefs to the Nestorian heresy. Anyway, Nestorius, who was the Patriarch of Constantinople from 428 to 431, said that Christ has two natures, divine and human, which is also recognised by the Catholic Church. But he meant it in almost two persons. Because, of course, Catholics say, and the majority of the Christian world, say for Oriental Orthodox, say that there's two natures in one person, and they're interchangeable, but they're still separate in a way. Like, they're not one nature, but they're still inseparable. But Nestorius basically said that there are separate in persons. There's that the divine Jesus, which is known as the Word, and then there's Jesus as in the human, and then there's Christ, which is the unity of the Word in Jesus, in the body of Jesus. And they think that Mary should be called Christokos, not Theotokos, and Christokos means Mother of Christ, while Theotokos means Mother of God, which is a big term used in Catholicism and Orthodox, because they believe that Mary was only the mother of Jesus and to an extent Christ as well, which is that unity. So they believe it's a heresy to say that she is the Mother of God, although that's kind of funny considering that literally the whole of the Christian world sees Nestorianism as a heresy. Anyway, one of his main opponents was Cyril of Alexandria, who basically accused him of saying that Christ and Jesus was, as in the divine and the human nature, were almost separate people. And the Council of Ephesus in 1431 condemned Nestorius. And the Church of the East embraced this theology in a way. They didn't come from Nestorianism, in that the Nestorians didn't found it. But they adopted the same belief in that they say that you can't say Theotokos, you can only say Christokos. And, of course, they're still around today, as you know. and they're mainly represented in the modern Assyrian Church of the East, because technically they're a grouping of the Church of the East, not the Church of the East itself. Very complex, I know. Anyway, they spread very effectively, and they were the main form of Christianity during sort of the late Middle Ages, Renaissance era in Central East and China. And they operated along the Silk Road, and the Syriac monks were very mobile, and they weren't really tied to any sort of imperial power. And they did tolerate cultural diversity. So I don't know if you've seen this before, but there's actually lots of graves in China of Christians that have a Christian, well, not the exact Christian cross. I think it's the Greek version, I think. That it is, it's like just a normal cross. And anyway, basically the graves are on there, but they have the fags, but their names and their tomb, well, like inscriptions, are written in the Fagsfa script, which is a Buddhist script. And before you start getting angry at me for mentioning Buddhism, I'm not going to say anything about Buddhism, like, combining with it. Like, they did to a bit, but not theological. Like, they didn't say that Buddha wasn't, they didn't say Buddha was a big figure or anything like that. But anyway, they had died, by the 6th century, the Church of the East had deities all around Iran, Afghanistan, even Sogdia, which is Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Bactria. And many Turkic peoples did join it. Well, many which were absorbed into the Mongol Empire, which ties back to the Ilkhanate, with some of the Khans being Christian. Well, one of them, but another one was originally, but then converted to Islam. Anyway, they had big ties with St. Thomas Christians in Kerala as well, in India. So I think that also is just things you know. And also, the big expansion into China happened during the Tang Dynasty, just if you wanted to know the dates and stuff. Anyway, there's the Jean Stele in 781 CE, which talks about the arrival of the missionary Alopen in 635. And they talk about a flourishing community known as Sing Sao, which is a luminous religion. And they did blend Chinese concepts like Taoist cosmology, like sort of folk ethics like ancestor worship, and some Buddhist terminology, but I don't think it was actually like a lot. Anyway, they were very successful at sort of adopting the local population without having to say Jesus was a Buddha or anything like that. They didn't have to say that, and they're very successful. You know, many Mongols became Nestorian, especially in the aristocratic group, and for a long time in especially the Ilkhanate, like in my last video, there was a large group of the aristocratic group around the Khan that was Nestorian Christian. And they did decline, and sadly there aren't really any Church of these communities in China and Central Asia. There's probably a few small ones, but they only really exist today, recognised in the Assyrian Church of the East. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about that. And at the end, shout out to Redeemed Zoomer. I'm going to say that again, Redeemed Zoomer, because I feel like some of you can't understand my voice. He is a good Christian YouTuber who, even though I'm not Christian, I like study the religions, as you know, and he's very useful, and I used him for some of the sources in this video, because I was trying to wrap my head around the concepts of Jesus and his persons. But one thing I do want to note is that in Oriental Orthodox, they do believe that he's one nature, that is a combination of divine and human. I might talk about that in a future video, maybe after my Golden Hall video. I don't know, maybe not. Anyway, this is History with Heath signing off. I'll see you on the next one. Catch you later. Bye.